2 days before his death, Jeffrey Epstein signed an updated last will and testament, detailing assets worth an estimated $577 million. For decades, Epstein was publicly described as a high-profile finance guy who moved other people's money around in creative ways. He supposedly charged tens of millions of dollars for exclusive tax advice and high-end wealth management. Yet he possessed none of the tools usually required for the job. He was not a tax lawyer, he was not a CPA, and he never held a Series 7 license or a CFA. He didn't even have a college degree. Even in the less competitive era of the 1980s, ultra-wealthy individuals didn't give away 8-figure fees for nothing. They expected verifiable achievements, a real staff, and actual operational value. Was Epstein a genuine Wall Street prodigy with a dark side hobby, or was he a full-time criminal utilizing a financial empire as a cover to bankroll and launder his operation? In 1976, Epstein was fired from a teaching job for poor performance. Shortly after, he landed a job at Bear Stearns, working as a floor trader's assistant. Late 70s finance was less about quantitative analysis and heavily dependent on relationship building. A person who could show wealthy clients a good night on the town often brought in more value than a researcher running data models. Epstein learned to navigate this world quickly. Without any formal financial education, he climbed from a junior assistant to a limited partner in just 4 years. By 1980, he was boasting in Cosmopolitan magazine that he only talked to people making over $1 million a year. Ironically, the magazine awarded the same Bachelor of the Month title that year to Prince Andrew. His tenure at Bear Stearns ended abruptly a year later. He had reportedly lent money outside industry guidelines, was having an office affair, and faced an SEC charge for trying to skirt public investment registration requirements. His first major financial stint ended in a cluster of regulatory violations and an insider trading probe. He had successfully established a pattern of failing upward. Before founding his own firm, Epstein picked up his first criminal conviction, a prosecution in the United Kingdom for the unlawful possession of an antique sword. At 27, he founded International Asset Group, or IAG. This was a murky consulting firm that reportedly specialized in recovering embezzled funds for questionable characters. His client list was kept quiet, but it famously included Adnan Khashoggi, a middleman heavily involved in the Iran-Contra geopolitical scandal. IAG relied on multi-jurisdictional shell corporations to route assets across borders, ensuring the paper trail was hidden. Later, Florida investigators were told to leave Epstein alone. He belonged to intelligence and operated above their pay grade. IAG transformed Epstein from a Wall Street networker into a global operative. He was mastering the use of international financial opacity to shield himself from legal scrutiny. In 1987, Epstein moved to Towers Financial to work for Stephen Hoffenberg. He earned the modern equivalent of $70,000 a month as a senior consultant, squeezing people for unpaid medical debt. On the surface, the firm focused on corporate takeovers. In reality, it was functioning as a massive Ponzi scheme. When the firm imploded in 1993, investors lost $450 million. At the time, it was the largest Ponzi scheme in American history. Despite his senior role as Hoffenberg's self-proclaimed protege, Epstein walked away from the collapse completely uncharged. By 1993, his resume consisted almost entirely of institutional collapse and criminal proximity. His wealth could not have come from legitimate financial acumen. The audited reality of Epstein's career is the story of an unqualified teacher accumulating SEC violations, geopolitical scandals, and ties to historic financial fraud. Today, the Justice Department is still reviewing 5.2 million documents in an attempt to untangle his opaque operations and undisclosed client lists. Epstein didn't generate $500 million through brilliant market trading. He exploited the relationship-based loopholes of 20th century finance. The $600 million he left behind represents the amassed spoils of a lifelong grift. His financial empire was a masterfully constructed cover to bankroll and launder his criminality. The slow release of documents surrounding the Epstein case has finally given investigators a chance to map out exactly how his businesses actually operated. When he died in 2019, his final will reported a net worth of $577 million. That massive figure cemented a public persona of Epstein as a Wall Street mastermind, a brilliant, if secretive, financier. But offshore leaks like the Paradise Papers tell a very different story. They expose his early role as the chairman of a Bermuda-registered hedge fund known as liquid funding. We know from a 2002 corporate disclosure that the Wall Street giant Bear Stearns, the very place where Epstein got his start, held an approximately 40% stake in the holding company that owned this exact offshore operation. With roughly $900 million in total assets, liquid funding was a pioneer in highly complex financial engineering. They built a AAA-rated special-purpose vehicle entirely out of heavily leveraged derivatives and swaps on mortgage-backed securities. This chart tracks the valuation of liquid funding's assets, and if you know anything about the housing market, you know exactly what happens next. In 2007, right as the global financial crisis was accelerating, that $900 million portfolio imploded. Less than a year later, his prestigious banking partner, Bear Stearns, completely collapsed as well. Reports suggest Epstein personally held a 10% stake in this operation. That means the crash likely wiped out over $50 million of his own capital. By all available records, Epstein was terrible at playing the markets. His primary investment vehicles were a disaster. So if his flagship fund failed and he lost massive sums of his own money, how exactly did he amass a $500 million fortune? To find out where the money actually came from, we have to look away from his investment returns and examine his fees. After stepping back from direct trading, he established a firm exclusively dedicated to managing the assets of billionaires. His very first major client was Les Wexner, the multi-billionaire co-founder of Bath & Body Works. The two men maintained an unusually close relationship for roughly 15 years. Epstein aggressively leveraged this connection, presenting himself as a talent scout for Victoria's Secret, a brand Wexner heavily invested in, which directly aided his criminal activities. His second known major client was Leon Black, the former CEO of Apollo Global Management, one of the largest private equity firms in the world. This digital balance sheet shows exactly how lucrative these specific relationships were. Over his career, Wexner paid Epstein $200 million. Black paid him at least $158 million. Add in payments from secondary clients like the Johnson family, and his firm brought in over $488 million in traceable asset management fees. By headquartering his firm in the U.S. Virgin Islands and claiming economic development incentives, he secured an effective tax rate of just 4%. He illegally kept nearly every dollar of that $488 million. But taking in $488 million over 3 decades does not mean you have $488 million sitting in your bank account today. You have to account for the burn rate. His lifestyle was incredibly expensive. He spent millions of dollars a year maintaining a fleet of private jets, paying property taxes, and covering the constant upkeep on hundreds of millions of dollars worth of luxury real estate. Then there were his legal bills. Court records show he retained more than 75 different lawyers over his lifetime, frequently hiring elite names like Alan Dershowitz, who billed several $1,000s an hour. If we bring the balance sheet back, we can see the math falling apart. Subtract decades of private travel, legal teams, staff, and his offshore fund collapsing, and that $488 million is drained. Yet his will claimed $577 million, leaving a massive unaccounted-for gap between his legal earnings and actual wealth. Even with generous estimates, his traceable fees and modest returns cannot cover his expenses and leave behind $500 million. There had to be an entirely separate, completely undocumented source of cash. To find that missing money, investigators realized they had to bypass standard corporate registries and look directly at his raw internal bank transactions. An ongoing investigation by the Senate Finance Committee mapped out the flow of funds between his company accounts held at major Western banks, and what they found completely eclipses his documented asset management fees. This graphic illustrates the true scale of his operation. The committee uncovered over $1.9 billion in direct transactions moving through his network, nearly 4 times his total known lifetime revenue. This volume is explained by transactions linking his accounts to currently sanctioned Russian banks. This discovery places his operation in an international context that extends far beyond the handful of American billionaires who claim to be his only clients. When you consider that figures like Leon Black were sophisticated financiers running major investment firms, paying tens of millions a year for boilerplate tax advice never made sense. These astronomical fees served as a quid pro quo for access and services entirely unrelated to wealth management. Epstein's wealth is the result of a deliberate system, not a mathematical glitch. He used the opacity of offshore banking to act as a conduit, moving billions for clients who wanted their business to remain a secret.